Y'all ever hear about the story of the slave master that was so jealous of black women that she tortured her slaves and the community were disgusted and repoed her slaves? Get your popcorn. Now, this piece of antebellum trash name is Marie Delphine McCarty, better known as Madame Lalaurie. She was once owner of the very famous Lalaurie Mansion in New Orleans in the French Quarters. You can find this place on a lot of haunted walk tours. There's plenty of reviews and pictures online to show how haunted this place is. But I'm just gonna get into the meat and potatoes. Fun fact, Nicolas Cage actually purchased this mansion back in 2007. Why a rich Caucasian man purchased it, I don't know. I don't even know if he still owns it. Either way, this place is haunted as fuck. And the hauntings that this house experiences is from maids, slaves, etc. All the help. From here on out, I'll be calling Madame Lalaurie Marie or Delphine because she doesn't even deserve the madam in front of her name. Her maiden name is McCarty, and the McCarty men seem to love freed African American women. Whether they be mulatto or they were just black, they loved African American women. And this enraged Marie. Seeing her brothers, uncles, anybody else love on who she believed was beneath enraged her. Marie owned numerous slaves, and even for that time, her slaves were severely underfed, abused, and afraid of her. They were kept in horrid conditions and were severely underweight. People saw her slaves and decided to speak up. Even some very famous antebellum writers visited the Lalaurie mansion and were like, nah. Even reporting that she became so enraged at a 12-year-old slave for catching a beady bee in her hair and chased this 12-year-old slave, a child, around the house until the little girl jumped to her death. Because the little girl knew if she had caught her, she was going to send her to the torture room. Now, like most races, in public, she seemed to be very kind to black people, even freeing two of her slaves. But it was all for societal acceptance. She really was evil behind closed doors. Now, word spread around town that this lady was very evil in 1832, that officials prompted an investigation into her mistreatment of her slaves. Now, initially, they found no wrongdoing, but see, Marie messed up. That story about the young slave girl that jumped to her death, her name was Leah. And she showed her ass so bad in front of someone of importance in that time. A famous 19th century writer named Harriet Martineau, sorry if I'm saying it wrong, witnessed this whole interaction between Marie and the 12-year-old slave girl named Leah. So she was essentially a whistleblower. They buried little Leah behind the mansion, and Harriet proceeded to tell what she knew. This whole interaction caused Marie to lose her other nine slaves. So they took the slaves and sold them at auction. This slick motherfucker right here had a relative buy the slaves, be the highest bidder on the slaves, and brought them back to their living hell. On April 10th, 1834, a fire broke out in the kitchen. When police and fire marshal investigated the fire and put it out, they found a 70-year-old slave who was the family's cook handcuffed to the oven. This 70-year-old slave admitted that she was trying to commit suicide. Apparently, she did something that Marie didn't like and knew she was going to go to the torture room. And she claimed anyone that went upstairs to the torture room never came back. The story of this 70-year-old slave landed in the newspaper, and bystanders were not having it. That includes W bystanders. They demanded to see her slave quarters, her house, okay? To see where her slaves were staying, the conditions they were staying in. They wanted answers. Marie was like, nah, y'all not coming up in here. So these bystanders broke the doors down to her house, went upstairs, where this 70-year-old slave said that there was a torture room and inspected it. What they found in this said torture room granted Marie her fairly due spiritual reparations. They found the bodies of several mutilated slaves. Some were hanging, some were missing body parts, and some were stretched, like their limbs were stretched. She actually had a senior citizen chained up down there with a wound on her head so bad that she couldn't even walk. But the bystanders don't get off very easily either. When they found these slaves, they removed them from Marie's torture room, took them to jail, and let over 4,000 people walk through like it was a viewing of a body and look at these people, because that was the sensible thing to do, right? I mean, it's not like any of them needed medical treatment. Long story short, Marie and her family escaped the mansion before the angry mob and before all of this stuff kind of came out. They searched the grounds after this and found several bodies of slaves, children, slaves buried, older slaves. It was just a cemetery in the back of this place. Now, some historians say what Marie did for the 15 years after this is unknown, but she did run back to Paris. But the spirits of the slaves that she dismembered, murdered, everything are still here. I mean, for Christ's sake, on Google, she's listed as a serial killer. People visit this mansion and take pictures, and whenever they go to look back at the pictures, they see apparitions. If you look right here and look at this picture, see a difference? It's a face. Here too. You see up in that little crack? This one is interesting because this one said, doesn't this look like Baron? Which, if you know who that is. Has a top hat on and sitting and crouching at one of the entranceways. Right up on the second floor, it looks like a maid is looking out the window. To my understanding, no one occupies this house. Now, while some say that they don't know what happened to Marie in Paris after all of this, others say that she was mauled to death by a wild boar pig while on a hunting trip. And that would serve her right. Do good and be good.